In the vast emptiness of space, silence had always been their constant companion. That was, until it arrived. A behemoth that defied comprehension. A vessel that turned the familiar void into something alien and hostile. The massive ship hung above outpost Helios like a blade suspended by an invisible thread, its obsidian surface drinking in what little light reached this desolate moon. Riker Aemon hadn't always been a man prone to trembling. Before his assignment to Helios, he'd been a decorated marksman with steady hands that could thread a needle at 50 paces. Now those same hands betrayed him as he stood atop the eastern observation tower, his fingers twitching against the cold metal railing as he stared up at the monstrosity that had appeared without warning in their skies. The outpost's artificial atmosphere seemed thinner than usual, as if the very air was cowering from the presence above. 3 months ago, Aemon had volunteered for this assignment, drawn by the promise of double pay and the romantic notion of being among the first humans to guard humanity's furthest outreach. Now, that decision felt like a cosmic joke. "You're thinking too loud," came a familiar rasp from below. Theolida's voice carried up the ladder well before her weathered face appeared at the tower's opening. Unlike most soldiers who treated their mandatory head shaving as a burden, Lida wore her bare scalp like a badge of honor, often joking that hair would only get in the way of her aim. "I knew you'd find your way up here," Aemon managed, trying to keep his voice steady. "You always did have a thing for high places." Lida didn't bother standing, instead settling on the edge of the opening with her legs dangling into the void below. Her dark eyes never left the ship above them. "Remember when we first arrived? How we used to sit up here and count stars until Commander Deevs would catch us and assign extra duties?" The memory should have brought a smile, but Aemon could only manage a grimace. Those early days felt like they belonged to different people now. "Seems like a lifetime ago." 6 months, Leda corrected, finally tearing her gaze away from the sky to look at him. "We've been here 6 months, 4 days, and approximately 7 hours. Not that I'm counting." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken fears. Both of them had been through the standard briefings about humanity's first contact with the Meridians, as the alien species had been dubbed. The official story was one of peaceful cooperation, of shared scientific advancement and cultural exchange, but there had always been whispers, rumors that slipped through the cracks of military discipline. "My sister," Aemon began, his voice barely above a whisper. "She works in the diplomatic corps back on Earth. 2 weeks ago, she sent me a message. Just 2 words. Be ready." He hadn't told anyone about this, not even during his mandatory psychological evaluations. "I thought she was being paranoid." Leda's expression hardened. "There's a reason they put us here, Aemon, and it wasn't for the view." Before he could respond, a low vibration began to pulse through the tower's structure. At first it was barely noticeable, more felt than heard, but it quickly grew in intensity. The metal beneath their feet began to hum, and loose equipment started to rattle against their mountings. "They're powering up something," Leda said, already reaching for her weapon. "This isn't right. This isn't—" The rest of her words were drowned out by the sudden wail of the outpost's alarm system. 3 short bursts, a pattern they had drilled for but never expected to hear. "Bombardment warning!" The first impact came before either of them could reach the ladder. The explosion threw them both against the tower's walls, and through the ringing in his ears, Aemon could hear the screech of tearing metal. The world tilted sideways as the tower's support structure began to fail. "Move!" Leda's command cut through his shock, her hand grabbing his collar and yanking him toward the exit. They half climbed, half fell down the ladder as more explosions rocked the outpost. The artificial atmosphere filled with debris and dust, turning the familiar landscape into an alien battlefield. Through the chaos, Aemon caught glimpses of other soldiers running for cover. Some were already down, their forms still against the grey soil. The training that had seemed so pointless during peaceful times now kicked in with brutal efficiency. Stay low, find cover, move to the nearest hardened shelter. The mess hall's reinforced entrance loomed ahead like a Salvation's Gate, its heavy doors already cycling through emergency protocols. Armen's lungs burned with each breath, the dust-filled air feeling more like liquid than gas. Behind them, another explosion sent shockwaves through the ground, and he felt Leda's hand grip his arm, steadying him as they stumbled forward. Inside, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Emergency lights cast everything in an eerie red glow, creating dancing shadows that made every movement seem more frantic than it was. Soldiers huddled in corners, some bleeding, others simply shell-shocked. The air was thick with the smell of burnt electronics and fear. 19, Eamon heard someone counting. 20, 21. It was Private Marcus Rivera, a young technician who'd arrived just last month. He was counting survivors, his clipboard shaking in his hands as he moved from group to group. Through the haze of dust and emergency lighting, Commander Deevs emerged like a spectre of war. His presence seemed to fill the room, pushing against the walls with an almost physical force. Unlike the rest of them, his uniform was still immaculate, as if the chaos outside had respectfully avoided marking him. "Listen up," Deevs' voice cut through the din like a plasma torch through hull plating. "I need everyone's attention, and I need it now." The room fell silent, save for the distant rumble of explosions and the occasional groan of the structure above them. Amen watched as Leader pushed herself to her feet, her face a mask of barely contained rage. Blood trickled from a cut above her eye, but she either didn't notice or didn't care. "Sir," she began, her voice trembling with emotion, "we deserve to know what's happening. What did we do to provoke this?" A bitter laugh escaped Deevs' lips, but it held no humor. "Provoke? Private Palms, you're operating under the assumption that we needed to provoke them at all." He moved to the center of the room, his boots leaving clear prints in the settled dust. "What we did was exist. What we did was survive. What we did was refuse to bow down and accept the role they had planned for us." The commander's words hung in the air like smoke, heavy with implications that made Eamon's stomach turn. All those training exercises, all those drills that seemed excessive for a peaceful outpost, they hadn't been preparation for an accident or a natural disaster. They'd been preparation for this exact moment. 3 years ago, Deevs continued, his voice dropping to a tone that demanded attention, when the Meridians first contacted Earth, they presented themselves as benevolent explorers. They offered technology, medical advances, the stars themselves, but there were those among us who saw through the facade, who recognized the look in their eyes when they watched us struggle with their gifts. It was the same look a scientist gives a particularly interesting lab rat. Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. Dust rained from the ceiling, but Deevs didn't even flinch. "What none of you know, what none of you were cleared to know, is that this outpost isn't just a random military installation. We're sitting on something that could change everything. Something they want badly enough to break their own carefully crafted illusion of peace." Deevs moved to one of the mess hall's seemingly ordinary walls, pressing his palm against a section that looked no different from any other. A hidden panel slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a narrow corridor bathed in blue emergency lighting. "In the early days of first contact," he continued, gesturing for everyone to follow him, "we managed to get our hands on something they never intended us to have, a piece of their core technology that they thought we were too primitive to understand, let alone replicate." The group moved through the hidden passage, their footsteps echoing off metal walls that seemed far newer and more advanced than anything else in the outpost. Our men noticed strange symbols etched into the surfaces, definitely not human in origin. "What we're protecting here," Deevs explained as they descended deeper, "is humanity's insurance policy. Our scientists have spent 3 years reverse engineering what we found, and 6 months ago we succeeded. That's when this outpost's real purpose began." Another explosion rocked the structure, but the vibrations felt more distant now. They must have been several levels below the surface. Leader, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "The supply ships," she said, realization dawning on her face. "They weren't bringing supplies at all, were they? They were taking something out." Deevs smiled, but it was a predator's smile. "Copies. We've been distributing copies of the technology to hidden facilities across human space. This facility held the original until today." They emerged into a chamber that made Eamon's breath catch in his throat. The room was circular, its walls covered in displays showing real-time data he couldn't begin to understand. In the center stood what looked like a simple black cube, no larger than a bread box, but something about it made his eyes want to slide away from it. "This," Deevs said, approaching the cube, "is their greatest weakness, a key to their entire technological infrastructure. They built their empire on the assumption that no other species could comprehend how it works, let alone replicate it. That arrogance will be their undoing." The commander turned to face them, his expression hardening. "But getting this off-world won't be easy. They know it's here. That's why they're trying to level this entire facility. They'll throw everything they have at us to prevent this from reaching Earth Command." And what exactly is our chance of success? Rivera asked, his voice barely a whisper. Statistically, almost zero. Deevs' blunt answer hung in the air for a moment before he continued. But statistics don't account for human determination, or for the fact that we've prepared for this moment since day one. The commander moved to a control panel, his fingers dancing across the interface with practiced precision. A section of the floor began to retract, revealing a sloping tunnel that disappeared into darkness. 2 kilometers below us, he explained. There's a hangar. In it, you'll find a ship unlike anything you've ever seen. It's a hybrid, Meridian tech merged with human ingenuity. It's fast, it's heavily shielded, and, most importantly, it's invisible to their scanning systems. Another explosion rocked the chamber, this one powerful enough to make the lights flicker. Deevs checked a display on his wrist device and grimaced. They're changing their attack pattern. They're not just bombing randomly anymore. They're searching. We have maybe 20 minutes before they find this level. Who's flying it? Leda asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. You are. Deevs' response drew surprised looks from everyone, along with Eamon. You two have the highest simulator scores in the outpost, and more importantly, you've both demonstrated the kind of quick thinking we need. Eamon felt his throat go dry. Sir, we've never. None of us have ever done what we're about to do, Deevs cut him off. But that's humanity's greatest strength. We adapt, we improvise, we survive. The commander retrieved the black cube, carefully placing it in a containment unit that seemed to pulse with its own internal energy. The rest of us will provide a distraction. We have enough firepower in the armory to make these bastards think twice about following you too closely. That's suicide, Rivera protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Deevs acknowledged, but every second we buy increases your chances of getting that cube to Earth Command. And trust me, once they understand what we've managed to do here, the Meridians will learn what it truly means to fear humanity. The commander handed the containment unit to Eamon, who nearly dropped it, surprised by its weight. The tunnel will take you directly to the hangar. The ship's AI will handle most of the technical aspects. Your job is to make decisions it can't make. To think in ways they won't expect. As if to emphasize the urgency, another explosion shook the chamber, this one close enough to send cracks spiderwebbing across one of the display screens. Deevs turned to address the remaining soldiers. The rest of you, with me, we're going to remind these arrogant bastards why humans have survived every catastrophe our world has thrown at us. Why we've outlasted every predator that thought we were prey. Today, we show them that humanity isn't just another species to be studied and controlled. We're their worst nightmare. The group split with military precision, though the weight of what was about to happen hung heavy in the air. As Eamon and Leda prepared to descend into the tunnel, Deevs caught Eamon's arm, his grip like iron. No more thing. The commander's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. If they catch you, if there's no way out, destroy that cube. Better it be lost forever than fall back into their hands. Eamon nodded, unable to find words. The containment unit felt even heavier now, as if the fate it carried had physical mass. Leda was already at the tunnel entrance, her face set in grim determination. The descent was steep and seemed endless. Emergency lights cast long shadows ahead of them, and their footsteps echoed off walls that seemed to absorb sound in unnatural ways. Neither spoke. What could be said in the face of such overwhelming responsibility? After what felt like hours but couldn't have been more than 15 minutes, they emerged into a cavern that defied belief. The hangar was vast, carved directly from the moon's bedrock, but it was the ship at its center that made them both stop in their tracks. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, a perfect fusion of human and Meridian design. Where human ships were typically bulky and utilitarian, this vessel was sleek, almost organic in its curves. Its hull seemed to shift colors as they watched, like oil on water. "That's our ride?" Leda's voice was barely a whisper. "It's impossible," Eamon finished. Above them they could feel, rather than hear, the continuing bombardment, now accompanied by new sounds, weapons fire. The distraction had begun. They approached the ship, and a hatch opened silently, revealing an interior that was surprisingly familiar despite its alien elements. As they entered, displays came to life around them, and a voice spoke, not human, not Meridian, but something in between. "Welcome, Pilot Eamon, Pilot Leda. All systems are operational. Launch sequence can begin on your command." Leda took the pilot seat while Eamon secured the containment unit and moved to the co-pilot position. The controls responded to their touch with an intuition that felt almost supernatural. "You know," Leda said as she initiated the launch sequence, "I always wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. Be careful what you wish for, right?" Eamon managed a weak smile. "At least we'll have a story to tell if we survive." Above them, the hangar's massive doors began to part, revealing a tunnel that led up at a sharp angle. Through their comm system, they could hear the sounds of battle intensifying. Deevs' voice crackled through their headsets, punctuated by weapons fire. "Launch now. We've got their attention, but it won't last. Remember what you're fighting for. Remember what's at stake. Show these bastards what humanity is capable of." The ship hummed to life beneath them, its hybrid engines producing a sound unlike anything they'd ever heard, a harmonious blend of human engineering and alien technology that seemed to resonate with their very bones. "All systems green," the ship's AI announced, detecting multiple hostile vessels in low orbit, calculating optimal escape trajectory. Leda's hands moved across the controls with increasing confidence. "How much time did they spend training us in those routine simulators, do you think?" she asked, a hint of her old sarcasm returning. "Betting those weren't standard flight patterns we were practicing?" "Nothing about this place was standard," Eamon replied, monitoring the defensive systems. The displays showed at least 5 Meridian vessels in attack formation above the outpost. "They're concentrated on the main facility. Deevs is keeping his word." The launch tunnel stretched before them, its walls reinforced with the same strange material as the ship's hull. As they began their ascent, the vessel's stealth systems engaged automatically, wrapping them in layers of technological invisibility that made Eamon's eyes hurt if he looked at the external cameras too long. Through their comms, they could hear the battle raging above. Deevs' voice cut through occasionally, barking orders and coordinates. The sounds of human weapons, primitive by Meridian standards but wielded with desperate fury, mixed with the higher-pitched whine of alien energy weapons. "Approaching tunnel exit," the AI announced. "Caution, heavy enemy activity detected in target zone." Leda's jaw tightened. "Amen. I need you to handle point defense if we're detected. I'll focus on evasive maneuvers." The tunnel exit was approaching rapidly, too rapidly. Amen's hands hovered over the weapons controls, though using them would immediately reveal their position. The containment unit pulsed behind them, its precious cargo seeming to respond to their proximity to the enemy. "Commander," Leda called into the calm, "we're about to break surface. Status." Deevs' response came through static and explosions. "We've got them focused on the western quadrant. They've committed most of their ground forces. You'll have a narrow window on the eastern approach. Make it count." The ship burst from the tunnel into chaos. The sky above was filled with energy weapons and explosions, illuminating the moon's grey surface in flashes of deadly light. The main outpost was partially collapsed, its towers broken and burning. Through gaps in the battle, they could see the massive Meridian dreadnaught hanging in low orbit, its weapon ports glowing with barely contained power. "Multiple targeting systems scanning the area," the AI warned. "Stealth systems holding but showing strain. Recommend immediate execution of escape vector." Leda's hands were steady on the controls as she guided them through the maelstrom. "Amen, what's our best route?" He studied the tactical display, looking for patterns in the chaos. "There's a gap in their coverage at bearing 47, but it's closing fast. If we're going to move, it has to be now." The ship surged forward, its hybrid engines pushing them back into their seats with crushing force. Leda threaded their vessel through the chaos with impossible precision, each movement calculated to appear as nothing more than battlefield debris to any watching sensors. "Energy spike detected," the AI warned. "Meridian vessels are implementing a containment grid." Through the view screen, they watched as beams of energy began connecting the enemy ships, forming a deadly net designed to trap anything trying to escape the moon's gravity well. The gap Eamon had spotted was rapidly shrinking. "They're not just trying to stop us," Eamon realized, watching the pattern emerge. "They're herding us. They want us to run straight into their dreadnaught's main weapons." Deevs' voice crackled through their comms one last time. "Whatever happens, don't let them dictate the terms of this fight. Remember, they think they know how humans think. Prove them wrong." The transmission ended in a burst of static and a distant explosion that lit up their senses. Leda's knuckles went white on the controls. "Amen," she said, her voice tight with controlled tension. "I'm going to do something incredibly stupid. Be ready." Before he could respond, she yanked the controls hard, sending their ship into a dive straight toward the moon's surface. The AI blared warnings as they accelerated, the ground rushing up to meet them with terrifying speed. "They expect us to run," Leda explained through gritted teeth. "To flee like prey. So, we're going to do the opposite." Eamon understood suddenly, his hands flying over the weapon's controls. "We're going to attack the dreadnaught. They'll never expect that." The ship skimmed the moon's surface, using its cratered landscape as cover. Above them, the energy net tightened, but they were no longer trying to escape through it. Instead, they were circling around, building speed and momentum like a sling. "Stealth systems at critical levels," the AI announced. "Failure imminent." "Good," Leda snarled. "We're about to announce ourselves anyway." With a maneuver that should have torn the ship apart, she pulled them into a vertical climb, aimed directly at the dreadnaught's underbelly. Their stealth systems failed in a cascade of sparking energy, revealing them to the enemy fleet. There was a moment of confusion in the Meridian response, a crucial hesitation as they processed this seemingly suicidal attack. It was all the advantage they needed. The ship screamed through the void, every system redlining as they rocketed toward the massive dreadnaught. Proximity alarms blared as enemy vessels scrambled to intercept, but their confusion had cost them precious seconds. "Multiple weapons locks detected," the AI reported, with what almost sounded like excitement. "Calculating survival probability, 17%, and falling." Eamon's fingers danced across the weapons console, not firing yet, but preparing. "We're not going to survive a direct confrontation with that thing." "We don't need to," Leda responded, her eyes fixed on their target. "We just need to get close enough to make them flinch." The dreadnaught's weapon systems were coming online, massive energy signatures building in its forward arrays. But Leda had guessed correctly. They were hesitating, unwilling to risk destroying their prize along with the ship carrying it. "Now!" Leda shouted, and our men unleashed everything they had. Not at the dreadnaught, but at the space around it. The hybrid weapons, human missiles loaded with repurposed Meridian technology, detonated in a carefully calculated pattern, creating a cascade of energy distortions that played havoc with alien targeting systems. In the same instant, Leda executed a maneuver that defied both physics and sanity. She rolled their ship through the explosion's aftermath, using the energy discharge as cover, and dove beneath the dreadnaught's defensive screen. "Hull breach detected in engineering," the AI announced, compensating. "Shield failure in 30 seconds." They were so close to the dreadnaught now that its massive hull filled their entire view, its surface details resolving into an alien landscape of technology and weaponry. Smaller vessels were converging on their position, but they were too close to their mothership to risk opening fire. "Ready for Phase 2? Leda asked, her voice strained with concentration. Eamon checked the containment unit's status one last time. "Ready. Let's show them what humanity's really capable of." Leda smiled, a fierce, predatory expression that would have made Commander Deevs proud. "Initiating Emergency Protocol Alpha. AI execute command sequence Sierra 9-7. Command acknowledged. The AI responded. "Warning. This action will result in catastrophic system failure. Proceed." "Do it." The ship's hybrid core began to pulse with increasing intensity, its Meridian components reacting to the human modifications in ways their creators had never intended. They weren't just escaping, they were about to demonstrate exactly why the aliens had been right to fear human ingenuity. "Core destabilization in 15 seconds, the AI announced. "Recommend immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel." "Funny," Leda muttered, her hands steady on the controls as she positioned them precisely beneath the dreadnaught's main power distribution node. "I always appreciated the AI's sense of humor." The enemy ships were closing in, but they'd realized too late what was happening. Armin could almost imagine their confusion as they detected the energy readings from their ship, readings that should have been impossible, a combination of technologies that should never have worked together. 10 seconds to critical failure. Eamon secured the containment unit to his survival harness. "Remember the simulations. We'll have exactly 3 seconds after separation." 9 seconds. Leda's voice was eerily calm. "Just like training, right? Except this time, if we miss our window, we die in the cold vacuum of space." 8 seconds. Through the view screen, they could see emergency protocols activating across the dreadnaught's hull. The aliens had finally realized what they were attempting, but physics was physics. Even a ship that size couldn't move quickly enough to escape what was coming. 7 seconds. "For what it's worth," Eamon said, checking his harness one final time, I'm glad it's you here with me, leader. 6 seconds. She spared him a quick glance, her eyes fierce with determination. Save the sentiment for when we're drinking to this back on Earth. 5 seconds. The ship's hull was beginning to vibrate as the core approached critical mass. What they were about to attempt had only ever been theorized, a desperate gambit born from humanity's understanding of both their own and Meridian technology. 4 seconds. All escape pods charged and ready, the AI reported. It has been an honor serving with you both. 3 seconds. Leader's hand hovered over the final sequence initiator. See you on the other side, amen. 2 seconds. The dreadnaught's emergency systems were fully engaged now, its massive engines flaring as it tried to pull away, but they were already too close, too perfectly positioned. 1 second. Now! Leda shouted, slamming her hand down on the controls. Everything happened at once. The ship split apart in a controlled explosion, its hybrid core releasing a burst of energy that defied conventional physics. The escape pods shot away from the dissolving vessel like bullets from a gun, carrying Amen and Leader in opposite directions through the chaos. The reaction they'd triggered wasn't just an explosion, it was a cascade failure that exploited a fundamental weakness in Meridian technology, one that their arrogance had prevented them from ever considering. The energy release created a localized distortion in space-time, a ripple effect that human scientists had theorized but never been able to test. Until now. Through his pod's viewport, Amen watched as the distortion wave hit the dreadnaught. The massive ship's shields, designed to repel conventional attacks, might as well have been tissue paper against this hybrid assault. The wave passed through them without resistance, making contact with the hull. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Meridian technology, dependent on principles their scientists had thought immutable, began to fail in cascading waves. Systems crashed, weapons powered down, and artificial gravity failed throughout the massive vessel. The smaller ships caught in the periphery of the blast suffered similar fates, their crews suddenly finding themselves in command of extraordinarily expensive pieces of space debris. Pod stabilization complete, Amen's AI subset announced. Tracking signal detected from secondary pod. Pilot Leda's vital signs are stable. Amen clutched the containment unit tighter as his pod's emergency thrusters fired, adjusting his trajectory toward the predetermined rendezvous coordinates. The cube inside seemed to pulse with renewed energy, as if responding to the chaos they'd just unleashed. Through the general comm channel they could hear the confusion and panic in the Meridian communications. Their supposedly superior technology was failing them, and they had no framework for understanding why. Leda's voice crackled through their private channel. "Did you see that? Tell me you saw that." "I saw it," Amen confirmed, allowing himself a small smile. "Think they'll reconsider their opinion of primitive human ingenuity? If they don't, we've got more surprises waiting." Her pod appeared on his sensors, adjusting course to match his trajectory. "Rescue beacon activated. Earth Command should have ships waiting at the rendezvous point." As they moved further from the chaos behind them, Amen thought about Deevs and the others back at the outpost. Their sacrifice had made this possible, had given humanity its first real victory against an enemy that had thought them insignificant. "This isn't over," he said, watching as the disabled dreadnaught grew smaller in his viewport. "This is just the beginning." "Good," Leita replied, and he could hear the fierce pride in her voice, "because I'm just getting started." The rescue beacons pulsed steadily in the darkness of space, their signal encrypted with codes that would mean nothing to Meridian's sensors, even if those sensors had still been functioning. In the distance, the dreadnaught hung motionless, its once imposing silhouette now reduced to a powerless hulk against the star-filled backdrop. "Multiple contacts detected," the pod's AI announced. "Matching known Earth Command signatures. Estimated arrival 3 minutes. Amen allowed himself to relax slightly for the first time since the ship had appeared above their outpost. The containment unit's steady hum reminded him of the price paid for its safety, not just today, but in all the careful planning that had led to this moment. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Leader's voice was thoughtful over the comm. "All those times Deevs made us run those standard evacuation drills. How he'd time us down to the second, make us do it over and over until we could do it in our sleep." "He knew," Amen replied. "He knew exactly what was coming, and he made sure we'd be ready without ever telling us why." "Incoming transmission from Earth Command Vessel Defiant," the AI interrupted. "Accepting connection." A new voice filled their pods, crisp and professional. "This is Captain Helena Reyes of the ECS Defiant. Identity confirmed. Recovery operation commencing. Well done, soldiers. You've just made history." As the rescue ships approached, their massive forms dwarfing the escape pods, Amen thought about the cube secured to his harness. Whatever secrets it contained, whatever advantage it might give humanity, had been paid for in blood and sacrifice. But more than that, it represented something the Meridians had never counted on: humanity's capacity to turn their own arrogance against them. "Captain Reyes," Leader called over the comm, "request permission to remain on active duty after debrief. I believe we've only scratched the surface of what we can do with this technology." There was a pause before Reyes responded, and Amen could hear the smile in her voice. "Permission granted, Private Palms. I have a feeling we're going to need soldiers like you for what comes next." As the Defiant's recovery beams locked onto their pods, Amen watched the disabled Meridian fleet growing smaller in the distance. They had struck the first real blow in what would undoubtedly become a much larger conflict, but they had also proven something vital: that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or technology, but in their ability to adapt, to think differently, to turn apparent weakness into unexpected strength. "Hey, Amen," Leader called as their pods were drawn into the Defiant's hangar bay. "Think they'll let us name the next ship we blow up?" He laughed, the sound carrying all the relief and triumph of survival. "I think, after today, they'll let us do just about anything we want." The hangar bay doors closed behind them, sealing them safely inside humanity's embrace. Above them, in the cold void of space, the disabled Meridian dreadnaught served as a monument to a crucial lesson: never underestimate a species that had survived its own worst impulses to reach for the stars. The war wasn't over, in many ways, it was just beginning, but humanity had shown its teeth, and the galaxy would never be the same. That was quite a ride, wasn't it? From the ominous arrival of the Meridian dreadnaught to humanity's first decisive victory against an overwhelming force. If this tale of human ingenuity and courage resonated with you, I'd love to have you join our growing community of sci-fi enthusiasts. Take a moment to subscribe to the channel and activate those notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. We're diving deep into more stories from the Human Meridian War, including next week's thrilling installment, the Battle of Europa. Your engagement means everything to us. Drop a comment below sharing your theories about the mysterious cube's secrets, or what you think happens next in this epic conflict. Every like helps spread these stories to others who share our passion for space opera and tales of human resilience. If you know someone who appreciates a good sci-fi story, share this with them. Together, we're building more than just a channel. We're creating a community of storytellers and dreamers who believe in humanity's potential among the stars. Until our next adventure, keep looking up, keep questioning, and never underestimate the power of human determination.